Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone. We're just going to give a minute or so for folks to join, and then we'll get started.
Yeah. For those who are on, thank you for joining today's webinar, Empowering Your Team, TMF Training, Competency, and Development. So yeah, like Louisa said, we're going to wait maybe another 10, 20 seconds just to see anyone else signing on. Okay.
Do you want to get started?
Yeah, I was going to say we don't have to sit here in silence any longer. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Hannah Brindisi. I am a TMF support analyst and functional line manager here at LMK. And so, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Louisa Monica. I am a TMF consultant here at LMK, and I have been in the industry for a very long time, back in the paper TMF days. So we're going to be here today to talk to you about some of the challenges that you may face when implementing TMF training into your organization. So I know as a project manager, training can sometimes be challenging, especially when introducing new technology and new processes. You can face a lot of resistance to change. People are set in their ways. Introducing a new eTMF system and training around the eTMF system can bring out hesitation and fear of using new technologies. So, what are some of the challenges that you are facing when implementing eTMF training?
I know from my standpoint as a line manager, it can be difficult to make sure that everyone is taking these same trainings, right? Because I may have people on different teams. So, there's kind of like basic new onboarding trainings that people take, but it can be hard to make sure that they are, completing their project specific trainings, right? So from like a manager standpoint, that is when I need to communicate with my team as well as the project managers to make sure that they are, staying compliant or they're hitting those marks where they should be before they can even start on like project specific trainings, right?
Right. I know some of me and some of the projects that I oversaw, I could see like there's, some inconsistencies in trainings. Like there's, training should be based on functional lines rather than just specific read, edit and administrative. Like it should be more developed towards that role.
Right.
So if you're a document specialist, like you want to know about document indexing from, putting those documents into a workflow, etc. So, that's where you could see the inconsistencies.
Sure, of course. Yeah. And exactly like you said, you want to make sure, depending on the role, everyone is getting that same training, right? And getting that same information because, you could be a new employee and you have very limited, work experience. So what you're getting trained on, you're kind of like a blank slate in a way, right? You're getting like that new information for the first time. But then you could have someone with years and years and years of prior experience, which is great, but that might conflict potentially with training of the organization you've just joined, right? So that can be tough too as the person receiving the training and the manager, right? Because you're trying to make sure, like, yes, you have good foundational training, but maybe that's not the way we do it at our organization or even this potential sponsor, right? They might do their trainings differently. So sometimes, following up with that can be tough too, right?
Correct.
I was gonna say.
Go ahead, finish.
I was gonna ask you, like, have you found that to be an issue a lot as a PM, or overall, do you find that the training is usually pretty consistent and you don't have to intervene too many times?
Well, the problem is like we have our learning management systems, things like that for the TMF trainings, where that could be specific. Yes, this is how you do this in the system. but then there's also the process.
Mm,
If they're not being trained on both or they're not understanding both, that becomes an issue because, you should have the SOPs and work instructions included as in that training. So not just the accreditation from your learning management systems.
right, right. Yes. Because that can definitely be a challenge, right? Like I know you and I, we
Yes.
talk about this, like some challenges, no matter, I feel like it's kind of can be industry wide, right? Depending where you work, like whatever, learning management system, your company has can have issues sometimes, right? Even just
Right.
sometimes it's not super intuitive. You don't know what depending on your role, you're supposed to be reviewing, right? They have everything from,
Yes.
support analyst or, or document specialist to all the way up to potentially director, right? Like there's all sorts of training in there. And so if it's not clear, sometimes you're doing trainings that might not apply to you or you sometimes can easily miss something that you don't know applies to you
Correct.
because if it's
Yep.
not labeled correctly or if it's not implemented correctly. I know that's happened to me multiple times at different companies before you get told, hey, log into the learning management system and do the trainings. You're like, oh, okay, what trainings? You don't want to assume everything is correctly assigned to you, but you kind of have to assume that to an extent,
Right.
So have you ever had issues like that too?
Yes, multiple times we face, issues that like that, and it can be challenging, and that's why it's like very important to develop, not only your SOPs and your work instructions, but also be giving them the tools that they can use, like
Mhm.
how to, develop trackers and having templates for things that they can utilize as part of their roles depending on which specific roles they're training in.
Mhm. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Oh man, the learning systems, they really can be tricky and you don't ever want to go into a new role and that be a worry, right? And as managers,
Right.
as a line manager and even as a project manager, our roles are hopefully to help mitigate that, right? And to help with there's always bumps, right? When you start new
Right.
somewhere or even a new project. Like that's our job, right? Is to kind of help with that and to help with any issues that might come up, right?
Right. And I faced some additional challenges. I'm going to give you one of the examples.
Hmm.
It's like there's a rush and a push to get the new system or a new ETMF system out. So yeah, they'll push the ETMF system out, but like the processes aren't developed at the same time.
Mm.
So they're not being pushed together at the same time. So a very good colleague of mine, gave me this analogy very many years ago, and I like to utilize that. It's kind of
Mhm.
like you're flying that plane, you know, and, and you're not building the process like around it. Like
Mm.
is the mechanics working? You're not checking to see.
Mm.
And you don't want to be in that situation.
Right. Yeah, no, that is a very good analogy too, right? Because we've all potentially been in a situation like that or something maybe that's similar. At the very least, we know someone, right? We've all worked with someone who's maybe had that experience or
Hmm.
not us, but probably us at some point. So that's a very good analogy there because that's a big part of why like the importance of even just TMF management and compliance, right? Because the
Right.
trainings are important, but we want to make sure that training is associated with good compliance for our TMF, right? Because
Right.
the trainings have to apply. The trainings have to, make sure
Right.
they're applicable to what the TMF and to what we want, right? So that's important. And so that's definitely something is, in for TMF management, we want to make sure the compliance is correct, right? So what does that kind of mean, right? Like regulatory compliance. And we want to make sure we're ready for, audit and inspection readiness. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that term, audit readiness, inspection readiness. We want to make sure we're ready for those type of things. Obviously, quality control. That's kind of the name of the game when it comes to the TMF, right?
Hmm.
Making sure we have efficient trial management system, right? That's kind of another thing. I feel like we've all worked potentially in a system that maybe isn't the most efficient, or there's lots of steps that kind of hold us back from, being as efficient as we can be, or being, getting those metrics, or making sure we're hitting those marks in a timely way. And I'd say another one is definitely, study transparency and integrity. That's, as TMF experts, that's kind of one of our main goals, right? Is making sure that, the TMF is holding up that integrity. And then ultimately, right, like trial success. That's our end goal always, is making sure that we are successful and that we're able to, put out the best quality we can. So what is something, like, I guess from you as a project manager, when it comes to all of that, obviously we have the training that is important. How do you as a project manager ensure that new and even existing team members maintain a consistent understanding of the TMF processes?
So what I like to do, and I like to recommend when I do consulting for our clients, is developing an oversight process. Like that alone. Each TMF system should have that reporting generated where you can track your document processing rates, and approval rates and error rates and all your quality issues. What kind of quality issues are you getting? So when a new employee starts, or somebody new, is coming onto a project, they have to learn, the TMF system that we're utilizing, as well as the client's processes. So with that said, they sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here.
You're fine. Yeah, the oversight. You're fine.
But when they complete their training, it's not like, hey, you completed your training, we're going to throw you in and that's it now. We'll run, generate metrics on that person, at the end of the week. Like I usually do it from every Monday. See how they did that week, and do a 10% quality control on things that they've indexed to make sure that they're filing it correctly, making sure the metadata aligns and is entered correctly. And if trying to capture trends. So everyone's going to make mistakes in the beginning. You need to be patient with that person. There's always going to be a learning curve in the beginning. At any time you're developing new technologies and new processes. So with that said, once you recognize the trends, hey, maybe we just need to sit down with them for 5 minutes just to go through. Have you checked your TMF index? Because the index will have the definition if you're not recognizing a document. Ask questions. With my teams, I also like to have weekly status meetings where, we discuss issues they're facing. If they've seen this type of document that they've never seen before, we'll have a brainstorming session to see where it best fits and things like that.
Yeah,
that's what I like to do. And, you want to develop that person as well, set them up for success as well as a successful TMF.
Sure, of course. I mean, everything you said, especially from the project manager's perspective, is that's what I want when I'm working on a project. I want that kind of oversight and that help. So, I mean, I guess for everyone that's on, what is something that maybe a project manager or a manager has done, for you that has helped you with your TMF processes, or just any question, right? Any question around the TMF training or, development, right? How has that helped where you've worked or you've done, or do you have questions? Maybe you feel like you haven't gotten that and you want kind of what, our take on that. So I know for,
yes, please, let's open it for those questions.
Yes. So this is really great that we have both of our different perspectives, right? Louisa being that project manager level, and then me being that line manager level, right? Like I said at the beginning, we have two different kind of takes on training and how we, ultimately we have to work together. Like we're collaborative, hopefully, when it comes to making sure everyone is kind of on the same page with training and making sure. So yeah, I would say from that question, for me, like I said, it is checking in with that project manager, right? If I know I have someone who they've done all their initial onboarding training, I'm going to be, maybe after a week or so, I'm going to be checking in. Obviously with them, we have one-on-ones, and, I only know what I know, right? I only know how someone's doing if they're telling me they're doing a good job. And that kind of also goes with, if they haven't been told they're not doing a good job, they think nothing's wrong. They might not know, right? So kind of the same thing. I like to try and check in with the project manager and say, hey, how is this person doing? They're new, they completed their trainings. They should be, up and running. I want to know how they're doing. And hopefully the project manager is able to give any sort of feedback, good or constructive, right? Because we want, at the end of the day, putting in that time in the beginning is ultimately going to help us out in the end, right? Like taking that time to really, like I said, someone might think they're doing it right. Someone might interpret a training a certain way and think, oh, well, I'm doing it this way. This is how, the person mentoring me showed me, and this is what the SOP I thought said. And they go off and they're processing documents, or they're thinking something's a certain way, and, it's not, or they're doing something a little different. So that's definitely from my perspective as a manager. I like to check in with the PMs and make sure that, we're all kind of on the same page. Or, if the PM says, well, I've reached out to this person a couple times to let them know that this is incorrect and they're still doing it. Okay, great. Now I can jump in and I can kind of try to intervene and say, hey, how's it going? Like, what's the block here, right? Like, do we need to do more training, right? Do we need to get you a different mentor? Do we need to go back to the learning management system, right? And take on some more trainings, right? So that's from my
to add on to that, Hannah, from the project management perspective. For me, like what I like to do is I do that oversight process that I spoke about earlier, but I'll sit down one-on-one with the team member that's struggling, in certain areas, and have a one-on-one session with them and go through. I like to do that twice before I reach out to the line manager.
Okay.
Have that intimate one-on-one sessions with them, just to see if they get an understanding. And then if I continue to see the same trends, that's when I open it up to the line manager and open up that communication with their line manager.
And I think that's great. Like, I think that's being proactive in your role, because sometimes someone just might not understand, right? It's especially being new, it's overwhelming, right? It's all.
It is overwhelming because you're learning your corporation's, processes. You're learning the department SOPs and then the project SOPs and their processes. It's a lot. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
On top of the systems that you're learning as well. So.
Yes, it can. And so I think your approach is, I know definitely from a manager standpoint and as someone who does process documents still, that is the approach I definitely like, is coming to me and saying, hey, like you said, one-on-one, I want to make sure, you're doing it this way. And then if it's still happening or maybe something else pops up, you're still kind of having that one-on-one hands-on. And then it's like, okay, this person's either not understanding it. Maybe I'm not delivering the content the correct way.
Right.
And maybe you said reaching out to the manager. So I think that is a great way to kind of go about it. And so I kind of guess with that, like, how do you think a good way for organizations to create that culture of accountability and ownership among team members when it comes to documentation and TMF management? I know for me, I've done this in the past. It's kind of like a pre and post training assessment, right? You can kind of do that. You can do kind of like a general assessment, see where everyone is, and then you can implement a training. And then post that training, you then do the assessment again, right? And so there you can also, it's a good way to even just check the progress of the person, but also, is the training even effective, right? Are we providing effective training for
Right. It's
people?
important to assess your training after that. If you're seeing, maybe our training isn't working, what can we fix to make it better? I
Exactly.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say too, is you want to make sure that, if you're the person who created the training, of course you think the training is good and effective, but when it's put
Right.
into actuality and process, and you see, okay, if it's one or two people, but if everyone is kind of getting the same result, okay, now as an organization or the person who created the training, right, you can now look back and say, okay, maybe this training isn't as effective as I thought it was going to be, or it's not as, effective or intuitive, or it doesn't have all those spots that we think it needs to be. So definitely I would say that. And then ultimately, on the job performance monitoring, right? I know you had mentioned, you and I had met a couple other times, and you talked about KPIs, right? Like, that's, if you kind of go into too, right, like that's a way to monitor or to see how training is effective as well.
Yep. KPIs is a very effective way, and for those of you that do not know what the acronym for KPI are, it means key performance indicators. So that's where you're checking your indexing, your issues, your timeliness. You also want to check that timeliness,
Mhm.
how, from date of upload to date of approval, why is it taking 40 days? What's going on? Like, where is that lapse? Where's that gap? And
Yeah.
what's causing that issue? So, it's constantly assessing and, taking accountability for issues that you're finding and trying to make it work better so people are successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all great ways. There's so many different training, techniques out there, right? There's, in-house, like your own, like we said, learning management system type of trainings. There's different certificates, there's different organizations. I mean, LMK, we offer TMF University, and that is a great way to get additional knowledge. And it can even just be a refresher. Like, some people, they may say, oh, I kind of already know a lot about this. It's so much more than that, and there's so many different materials in there. And so that is a great thing that at least LMK offers, out there, is TMF University. So I guess this would be a good question to the group, like, what are some other ways you've used trainings, like, outside of your organization, right? Are there different modules and different things out there? I know LinkedIn sometimes will have like different like quizzes or different certificates you can do through LinkedIn. Obviously, like I mentioned, we have TMF University here. So yeah, does anyone watching, or has anyone participated in TMF University?
And for those of you who don't know, what TMF University is, it's an educational program that is certified by International Association of Clinical Research. It's cohort-based learning. We have expert instructors, and it's industry recognized certification. So TMF University is an excellent resource for your training if you don't have that capability in-house to develop training.
Exactly. And it's, we've had people who've been in the industry a year, 2 years take the course. We've had people who've been in the industry 20, 30 years, right? Like, you can always refresh, you can always learn. And that's any training. That's not just TMF University, right? But that is what's great with TMF University specifically, is that we have these different cohorts, like Lisa said, and these different, levels that you go through. And so you're constantly learning, and you're being tested. There's an assessment also. And so it's not just I'm just listening to someone speak and that's it. You're really getting put to the test, and you're really getting your knowledge challenged, which is nice. So yeah, I guess this is another good question for the group. Does does your organization use modules like for video learning, or do they do live instructor trainings, or both? Love to hear from those who are tuned in.
From a project manager perspective, can I tell you what my preference is? I like both, to be honest.
Yeah.
The video modules are great reference to have, like, after you complete your first view, but like, you're able to go back and view it, where, in case, I take the training, but I'm not doing that process like until 2 months down the road. I forgot how to do it. So I can reference back to that video. But I always feel like that live instructor training is great because you're there live, you're asking questions and you're answering questions. And, so that's my perspective and, my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I'm definitely visual learner. And so having kind of both of those things, like instructor led is nice because, hopefully they give you the opportunity to ask questions, or maybe other people who are in the training will ask questions that you've thought of, you just haven't got the chance to. And you can, it's a little more personal sometimes, instructor led trainings, right? Something you can ask specific scenarios. You can ask questions about maybe something that is going on in your organization. Not like sponsor specific, but just like, hey, hypothetical, has this ever happened? Or how would you, handle this situation? So sometimes those trainings are nice, but exactly like you said, it's still great to be able to have reference material, right? Of, hey, like this applied in the moment when I was doing it. Now I'm on something 6 months later, I can just go back.
I forgot how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be able to reference that, or maybe that was, project specific training and I'm no longer on that project. Well, now I need to help out again, and I want a refresher. I can do it at my pace. Not dependent on, this instructor's only doing this on Fridays at 2 p.m. or something. Like, I can do it at my pace and I can make sure and I can reference that training. So I'm totally with you. Both are great, but some organizations don't have that ability, right? They don't have the live instructor training, or they only have that. They only have, you have the one class or the one training and that's it. And you better take good notes and kind of hope for the best there. So, interesting. Okay.
So how can an organization measure the effectiveness of TMF training and competency development to ensure staff are adequately prepared for handling the trial master files?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yes.
I guess that kind of is similar, I would say, and Lucy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's also kind of a similar answer to the like doing an assessment, right? Kind of taking that assessment. That's also a good way of being able to see how the training itself is doing and how, I guess like the retaining of it, right? Like if you take that training and then maybe a couple months later you do the assessment, like has that training stuck? Was it effective in that way? I would say that's kind of a good, it's kind of a dual answer a little bit, but I would say that. What do you think?
And I can speak to like certain experiences that I've had where you've taken the training and you've had the processes that you've learned, and there's a system of, and there's a little slight change on a new on an existing process, but so we don't know about it. So it's kind of nice to like have like a session or even send out a communication to say, hey, this is, this update came from the system. It's a system update. This is the way you do this for now, from this point forward, kind of thing. So that's a good way. Have refresher training courses if you need to.
Yeah, that's a good one. What's another one? I think also just, kind of, the job experience itself. Like you take the training and then you just have to be able to apply that. And then as managers, we run reports sometimes to see, effectiveness, timeliness, depending on the training they've taken, right? So if the TMF training specifically, right, is about, can't even think of an example. I know like there's always so project specific, but especially if it's project specific, right? It's easier sometimes to be able to kind of see that right away if it's being implemented correctly versus not, right? If you know, as a project manager, Louisa, if you do a whole training on, you know, there's a new system, a new way the metadata is being applied. And, you know, right after that, you can go and see that people are still not applying the metadata correctly. Okay, right there, right? That's an instant realization that either the training itself was not comprehensive enough, or people, you know, where was the breakdown, right? Like, where's the breakdown that they're able to kind of take that information and be able to run with it and then be able to apply that immediately, either to their project or anything like that. But yeah, I would say those are
Right. Or it could be something simple, like a process itself that's broken, not reaching out to people, like, for instance, translations. How
Mm-hmm.
do people go about filing translations? And this has always been mistakes that we've seen in the beginning, especially when new people are using the system. Do they file it separately? Then you have a document
Yeah.
that's loose in the English language, and then it's loose in the Spanish language, and then there's the certificate. So it's like, hey, you'll meet with them and say, no, you need to file it as one package. Local translated certificate, all as one package. So it could be something like that, process that someone's not understanding, or there's just confusion on how it's written in your work instruction or TMF plan.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Translations, that's
I know.
and it's not even just always new people, right? And it
Yeah,
can be, I know this is like always the thing in our industry, is like project specific, right? Like you might have been taught this one way, but this one specific project, this one sponsor wants it done, well, it seems like backwards, or the incorrect way, or they want it done a different way. And so that can go into the training as well, right? Is really making sure that, hey, I know this might not be the standard, but this is what they want. And so we need to be extra diligent about that and making sure that we're providing, at the end of the day, what the sponsor wants and what they are asking
right.
for. So yeah, all of that's really good. And so I guess a good, we can talk about training, we can talk about all that, but like at the end of the day, from managers' perspectives, right? We want to try and keep that good talent, right? We want to keep people who want to learn and who are willing to, dive into those trainings and want to better their knowledge and their selves, right? Because, like I kind of said earlier, you may have someone that's only has a year or two in the industry, but they want to learn, right? That you can tell they're hungry and they want to learn, and that's big to them. Or people who've been around forever too. That it's not just specific to that, but we want to make sure too that we are able to keep people like that at our companies. And if you're that person, you want to feel valued, right? You want to feel that the company acknowledges that you're doing those trainings, you're keeping up, you're keeping compliant, you're always asking those questions and following up, and you're not afraid to, as they say, like in school, like there's no dumb questions. And I feel like that applies to trainings too, and in this job, like
Absolutely, and it applies to this industry as a whole, because the reference model is forever changing, guidelines are forever
yes.
changing. Require FDA, EMA, like MHRA, like everything's constantly changing. So,
Mhm.
it's important, especially that we are regulatory compliant, and because at the end of the day, you know, a successful TMF, you want your TMF to tell the story of your clinical trial,
Mhm.
from protocol development to SIV to CSR, to FDA reviews and
Mhm.
approvals. You want that full story, and that all starts with successful TMF training.
Exactly. And having people who just understand that, right? Like understand the scope and what it means to work in the TMF and what the TMF really means, right? Like clinical trials are so large and vast, and there's so much that goes on, but the TMF itself is so incredibly important, and people who really understand that and care about that, right? That's what we want, right? Here at LMK,
Right.
that's what we look for. That's how you and I feel. And there's people like that also just out in the industry as well. Like, you care about your role, you care about your job. And so, maintaining that talent, especially from the line manager's perspective, like, that's a big deal for me, is like making sure I can foster a relationship in an environment that they feel heard, they feel seen, they feel like they can advance, right? And
Right.
not every person wants to climb the corporate ladder and be a director, right? You can still grow within your role, and that doesn't mean every year you're trying to advance. Or if that is what you want, that's what you and I are here for. It's not just line manager responsibility too. I'm sure you've seen, as a project manager, you can tell those people on the project who are kind of that go-getter, or they go to you and say, hey,
Right.
what can we do? What else is there additional trainings I can take? Is there, I've never worked on an EDL before. Is there anything I can do with that? Can I help you with anything?
Right.
So it's also important that we are able to recognize people like that too, that truly care. That's the biggest thing about this industry is, we care about the trial, we
Right.
care about the project.
Right. And you don't want your TMF to be an afterthought,
Correct.
because an inspector could walk in at any day, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and we've seen that happen,
Yes, happens.
and then there's that mad rush that, oh, they upload, 1,000 documents within like 2 days and expect it to
Mm-hmm.
be done by, yesterday.
Right.
And it's just, and then we run around scrambling resources to help because you don't want to get dinged you don't want to kappa files. You want to avoid those.
Exactly. And exactly like you said, you want to be prepared, right? It's
Yeah.
always being inspection ready or audit ready, but that's also why a lot of companies do, mock inspections or do internal audits, right? Trying to stay prepared, stay ready, and having everyone kind of be prepared. And that, when you do those internal audits, I've done those before. Like, I've been the one that has performed those internal audits, and sometimes the things you find are so basic and very easy changes, right? And you can tell that it's just a quick training, is something they're going to need to just do, like a refresher, really, if anything. And then, or you can see, okay, you see the same person's name, right? You see that it's the same person that's created the document, or it's the same person that's in the audit trail. You can see. And so hopefully that company then takes that information and they say, okay, this person needs a refresher, right? Like, where have we also dropped the ball? Because it can't always just be on the processor. It has to be, it's
No, the whole entire team needs to be held accountable. Whoever's responsible for the filing and approval, it just, your study managers and
Mhm.
everybody on that team, on that study team, is responsible for that TMF. It can't just be, the poor little Jane Doe that's
Yes.
a document indexer,
Right, because it's like, why is she failing? Right? Is it
Yeah.
she just doesn't understand, or does it go higher than that? Was the study owner not there helping? Was the PM, is the reference model off? Does the index need to be updated? Right? So that's where a lot of that can come in, and that's part of both of our jobs too. Like I've said, is making sure that we are keeping everyone compliant and making sure those trainings and reference materials too are accurate, because
And pertain to their roles, to their specific roles.
exactly.
Because, we've developed, specific study manager training, what, the study manager needs to do and what they're responsible for throughout.
Mhm.
Then you have your document analyst trainings, what they need to do. Like, this is why it's like very important to do role specific training.
Exactly. And then two, like, if someone is one role, but they've started helping you out on a project, and they're actually doing a lot more, maybe like associate PM level stuff. They're technically not, but maybe they're helping out
Mhm.
with that kind of documentation or those tasks. They may need to take that training, right? Because if they're going to be
Right.
helping you out longer than just, oh, a quick little project, it's like, oh no, they're here, they're helping. Let's make sure that they have the proper training too, just because that
Or if they're called in the scramble when there's 1,000 uploads because they have
it's
an inspection next week. You have
exactly.
to learn that quick.
Exactly. No, that is the perfect example too, because that's happened too. It's not always people, doing something up the next level. Sometimes it's, oh geez, I haven't processed a document in 5 years, Okay, well, here's quick training. Here's the review, kind of tying it back to if there's, video modules. Hey, watch this video training. It'll kind of give you all the guidance and we can put you with like a mentor. I know we do that a lot on projects. We try to have mentors for people that can help them. It's like that's kind of their contact person, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we like to create a space that anyone can be asked any question, but it's always nice to have that kind of like one contact person, right? Of like, hey, like quick question, like, can you help me with this? Or do you know where I can find this training? Like, is it in the learning management system or is it saved in our specific SharePoint system or is it in the sponsor SharePoint system, right? There's, depending on the project, sometimes, there can be 3 or 4 different places something might be housed, right? Like an SOP or something.
Right.
And then, definitely from the other side of that, we want to make sure our training is streamlined. We don't want it to be in 5 different places and people have to guess where to go.
Right.
Where, well, this training's over here. Well, this training's here. Well, that's the outdated training. So actually, we need to put that training back here. That's a lot for someone who has been on the project for a while.
Right.
Someone
And
who's
for
new.
a project manager, what I like to do for that is like you
Mhm.
create, specific like SharePoint. We use SharePoint where you can create project, that specific project space for all your
Mhm.
team members, and you have the training all in one place, like with links to where they need to go to. If it's the LMS system to take this training and that. So that's just some ways to help you know the study become successful, clinical trial and your TMF, and to avoid that the dings that you get at inspections and audits.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's working together, right? And it's also, wanting to make sure that we're giving everyone a voice that they can say to
Right.
even the project manager, hey, this is confusing. I don't know where this is supposed to be. It always is dependent, right? It's a massive study, right? There might be 5, 6, 10 different folders where things are stashed in. And as a project manager, you might have come on after. Maybe you weren't the project manager that started.
Oh
I'm
yes.
sure that's happened
Yes.
to you many a time. How do you deal with that when it's not you weren't part of like the kickoff or setting up, like we said, we use SharePoint, or how do you deal with that when it comes to the training material and just filing?
It's kind of like, and it's been a learn as you go because you're
Mm,
just thrown into. I've had situations where a project, manager, left on their own free will because they found another job else when they gave their 2-week notice.
mhm.
Okay, so they sat down with me for the 2 weeks, and I like kind of shadow them. So
Mhm.
that's one way to be effective. But if there's somebody that just left suddenly, or they got moved to
Mm,
another project that's more, pressing and more, important, then it's kind of like, you kind of hope that they're there still in the company to reach
yeah.
out and ask the questions. But I've had situations where the
Mm,
project manager left suddenly, and it's kind of like going through their entire history. You have to learn within that day. So
mm,
that's where it's like you got to learn as you go. And I'll have the team ask a question. If they ask me a question and I have no idea, I'll tell them I have to get back to you. I'm trying to acclimate to this project. I'm open and honest with them.
yeah.
I don't like to give people the run around and say, I'll do the research. I'll get you the answer that you need, but just be a little patient.
Yeah, and that communication is big, right? Because
Mhm.
hopefully, you are also working with people who understand that, right? Like, hey, I just inherited this. like you said, you got to give me a minute. I'm
Yeah.
trying to find it. It's not that I'm not giving you the answer. It's just I want to make sure that this is correct. So then when you do direct someone somewhere, first of all, you know where you're directing them, but then also
Yeah.
you're giving them the proper information so then they can be independent and go review that documentation, be up to date on the training or the SOP or what's going on, have the correct, reference material, and then go on their way. So really good at that. Well, I think we are getting close to the end. Again, if anyone has any questions for us, this is kind of the do or die moment. We'd love
I
to hear.
know it's just been the Louisa and Hannah show, but please
Which
feel
is
free
fine.
to
We
ask
like
any
that, but
questions.
we definitely want to hear
And we
from
could
you.
go on all day.
No. This is a great topic because, like I've said, we both have a lot of experience on both sides of this.
Yeah.
So, being able to give our experience and what we deal with, at least here at LMK and even at other jobs. We've all worked different places before. So, there's pros and cons everywhere. So again, we'd love to hear from anyone else, but if not, this we're wrapping up. It's been very fast.
Yes.
But yeah, if you have any questions and you can't think of anything now, or you're a little shy or anything like that, you can always email us at hello@lmkcrc.com. We'd love to answer any questions then. I know I'm that person where, like, as soon as something ends, I'm like, oh God, I would have asked this, or
I'm that person too.
it's like a drive home from something and you're like, oh my God, I would have asked, a million questions. Or I
Yeah,
like what
I
they said.
forgot to ask this.
Yes, or like, oh, I would have loved if they expanded on that a little bit. That can be something too of like,
Yep.
oh, I really like Louisa said this. I would have liked her take on, this experience has happened to me before. So, but yeah,
Please
okay.
feel
Well,
free to reach out, and thank you everyone for your time. We appreciate it.
yeah. And please feel free to join us on Thursday, March 20th at 11 for our next webinar. It's going to be Mastering Inspector Access, Streamlining Regulatory Review with Ben Rogers and Laurel Ann Schrader.
Oh, that's going to be a good one.
I know. I'm actually going to tune into that one because
I'm registering for that one as well.
That's great. But again, I hope everyone has a really great day. Happy Tuesday. And again, please feel free to email us with any of your questions and have a good one.
Bye, everyone.